everyone. My name is Sarah Bushkamp. I'm a creative director over at the Oprah Network.
Hey, I'm Paul Grinch, and I work for Discover Financial, and I'm now in the UX and innovation team.
Hi, I'm Olvetta Sampson. I'm a senior design researcher at IDEO here in Chicago.
Hi, I'm Mike Oren. I do freelance user experience research.
And I'm Jeff Mall. I lead digital strategy with an account over at the Open but I work for Digitas. So think about that for a second. It's complicated.
Meta.
All right, so to kick it off, I'm actually going to start with you, Jeff. And you've been in the design field for a while, and you see the big trends. You've seen them come and go. And what do you think are the current big trends that will be defining the next steps? And then do we as a community, as designers, prepare for it?
So first of all, being in the field for a while, does that mean I'm old?
However you want to hear it.
All right, so I thought that would go season. So I have the inside scoop because Casey and I work together and we're talking about this today. And we've seen some evolution of trends from, usability used to be really important, and it still is, but we've definitely started to see a combination of skills consolidate, whereas instead of UX being a specialty, we definitely see it being like table stakes. So companies are competing on experience rather than technology, which I think I saw a headline about that. And so the trend that I've seen over those years of getting older are, I'm not that old, are just that there's been a shift of skill consolidation and rejuvenation where we still need them, but we also have to move into becoming better at things like writing code and being analytical and being strategic.
So, does anyone want to respond to that before I...
Please add to the
Or add
conversation.
to it.
I'll try to start it off.
So you mentioned usability kind of becoming more mainstream. A lot of that too is democratization of research. So now, like I know Capital One, their researchers actually train their designers and their product managers to do a lot of those research themselves. And I was at Motorola, that was something that we did as well. Really empower the team to get some of the feedback themselves, especially if it's something more iterative, which I think just makes the product stronger.
Well, at IDEO, and research is kind of like how we start all our projects. Our whole team is together with research. But I think the point is that the research matters, I think, a little bit more because the experience matters. It's not so much the what can we do with technology, but kind of like testing control, authority, trust curves, these kinds of things that you have to test out with users. And because it's more or less kind of like how do we design this, it's more like how does the interaction and the experience work. And then when you get into moving from like designing a chair or designing a digital device or web to designing an intelligent system that's going to interact with other intelligent systems, you really don't design the experience, right? The intelligent system learns from the user and then the experience is different. So if that's the case, then our whole job kind of changes, right? Like we're not even designing for an interface anymore. We're designing for an experience that we don't even know what will happen. So how do you do that? You have to get to know your users very well. You have to get to understand their motivations and their actions. And so I do think that this trend of these silos between disciplines when it comes to research and execution and design will melt away, and they will have to. And the people who don't do that will be the dinosaurs, and the people who do will be the still alive in the future, right, as companies.
Yeah, and just to build off that too, I think it's really interesting when you start talking about desire paths and building off of desire paths. So all of a sudden now, consumers become a way bigger part of actually building the experience that they will participate in. So I think it's actually like having the consumer as a stakeholder or the user, consumer, I am a marketer. But I think that becomes an interesting part of the process now that plays off of user research.
Man, I'm the only one who can talk, so now I feel like I say something smart. Right, so I think the thing that fascinates me, I agree with everybody, by the way, this is what I've experienced. The thing that fascinates me the most about these things is everything changes with such increasing amount of speed, yet it stays the same. What we're talking about are the affect of design, but the core is still design. So I think that if we keep that in mind, it's not as intimidating. I think if we keep our minds and our eyes open to the world around us, these things become more apparent, they bubble up to the top, and we can effectively design with whatever affectation or tools that are going to be available to us. And I think that the elegance of the new tools and things like AI, I think that's an exciting prospect, not an intimidating one that I think is going to make us go away.
The optimist.
Yes.
So you bring up a good point about the different tools and the tool sets that we will have as things continue to evolve. And Mike, you've done a lot of work and a lot of writing around the intersection of user experience and data and the proper ways that we can use it to help us all design better experiences. So if you could speak to that at all, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I mean, so right now UX education teaches people how to program, how to code. To me, that's not actually the useful thing in order to kind of take your design or design thinking and then apply it to a product. Especially now that more and more data is becoming an object that we need to craft and kind of design the way data interfaces with the human. And a lot of times not through a visual interface, kind of getting a basic understanding of data structures and kind of theory of algorithms, not necessarily being able to write that code, but just understanding the difference between a binary search tree and a bubble sort or something else. I mean, bubble sort is a completely different thing than binary search tree, but just getting kind of the basics of that, I think is really going to be important.
Yeah, well, you know, like my background is journalism, right? I was an English major, so I'm about as far from tech as you can get. But this idea of as design evolves, as technology evolves, my focus has always been human-centered, right? It's been on the user. Well, it's difficult to understand what's feasible for the user if you don't understand the tools to design. And so prior to that, we talked about interaction design, understanding how to design interactions, you know, how to create those experiences through digital and web. And now it's how do you understand how to an intelligent systems interact with a human through voice and tech. Now it's like even clothing, right? So there are technology where the clothing can get the temperature actually of the room and make you feel it. For that accessibility for people who can't hear or can't see how the flow of the room goes. That's a whole different type of interface, right? That's not the screen. And so if you don't understand the capability of the technology, it's difficult to make sure that you're meeting the desire and the need of the user because you're looking at a very narrow lens. That doesn't mean all of us have to become technologists or data scientists. That's not what I'm saying. And if you really want a really good team, you want a data scientist there. But you definitely don't want to wait and say, okay, now we think that this is the design, bring the numbers and zero guy in, right? Like you want to make sure that the people who are using these tools and who are expert in it are alongside of you coming up with the best kind of way to execute a design experience. But you also want to be able to talk to them. So because I was working with people in software, I taught myself how to code. Now, you don't want to try out anything that I have coded, right? It will fail, but it would allow me to speak the same language with somebody who actually knows what they're doing when it comes to code. Now, I learned Python because I figured that was the language that data scientists were using, but you don't want to try out my data model, and it wasn't because I wanted to be a data scientist, but I wanted to be able to see how data could be used in service of the user, right? Not just because it's there and it's a new tool and it's technology.
I would agree with that. And if I could add to that, I think those are all brilliant points. This seems to be like everything is a band to me. I've worked in music, play music. This is like a band, right? Because I don't play the drums doesn't mean I don't understand the drums. But the best, most beautiful pieces of music, the most communicative pieces of music are when the band understands one another. It doesn't necessarily speak the language of bass or the guitar or whatever it is, but understands what their part is and what each part plays, including the one that they're the most expertise in. The other bit I think that's really important for me, or I've seen it be important, is understanding these things to understand not only what they can do, but also when they're not applicable to a situation. There may be a beautiful interface design that is geofence and blah 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 at a conference, and you think it's the most wonderful thing, and it might be the most wonderful thing, but the most practical solution for a user experience might be someone handing out flyers at the entrance of the conference, right? So, but I think that it's important to understand what you're talking about to get to that point. So you're not limited and going, all I know how to do is make flyers and hire a homeless guy to pass them out. You're understanding the breadth of what that user needs at that moment in time and what the most effective fit is to get that story across.
Did you see the announcement yesterday that Lyft has a new Taco Bell taco mode? So you can stop on your way home from your drunken night out and get some tacos?
Do they have the bathroom mode?
Coming soon. So, the geofencing thing made me think about it. But I think it's either in summary or just add a little bit is we talk about modeling experiences, but not from, well, sometimes from user research, right, to understand the experience first, but then to create a model like you would a financial model or a weather simulation to see how it might play out in the future. But it is what everyone is saying is you kind of turn it on and hit run and see what happens. I think we'll see a lot more prototypes with data embedded where we hit the go button and see what happens.
This is so easy. You guys are great. This is awesome. So to shift gears a bit, Sarah, you bring a great perspective tonight as a copywriter, and I just want to ask you, how do you see your role being involved in the UX design process, and how these two disciplines can work to provide a more unique or impactful experience for users?
First of all, the fact that a writer is sitting up here at a user experience design event is a miracle in and of itself. Just curious, like how many folks out there are UX writers or have a writing background? Oh, fuck yeah. Okay. Some people in here.
How they get in?
I don't know. I snuck them all in the backlash. But I guess the way that I see my role currently, the wrong way to use writers is obviously to have somebody come in and say, hey, we need copy for this button, which is all too familiar, I think, for a lot of writers in the room. So I think this is a common sense answer, but to involve a writer / I'm going to use a buzzword, sorry, storyteller to actually help not only create the experience alongside you, but to also be able to, create user stories, to be able to, craft a narrative that actually sells the experience in, to actually secure funding to make the experience happen. So I think that there's a lot of ways that writers can be utilized throughout the cycle of a project or building an experience. And in the future, I'm really excited as a writer because I think we will find what we see as forced collaboration. So if we're talking about a 360 experience where it's almost like filmmaking or crafting a gaming experience, sorry, but you need us. There's going to be scripting involved. There's going to be a lot of factors that you will want somebody with verbal capacity to go out and help you with. And to play off of what you're saying, I'm also an English major. My major was poetry, which frightened my family a lot because, my plan was to sit under a tree and read Charles Bukowski. But it's kind of incredible the way that the nuances of language, punctuation, breath, tone, voice, all of these things that I think I've always considered a given in an experience are now, I feel like, just coming about in terms of giving brands an edge, giving products an edge. So I'm really excited to be up here on the stage and like see so many people that have writing backgrounds raise their hand.
Yeah, and I'm a writer here, made a living as a writer, so I get you. But also, like, what's the difference between Siri and Alexa? Right? Like the pace, the tone, the response. That's
iambic pentameter.
right. Yeah, like that's engineered, right? That doesn't just happen, right? It's not just organic, right? And I think another thing about it is that recently in a project where if I asked you to design a new tool, a new truck for 20 years from now, what would you do? Maybe you could, maybe it would be really cool, you could think of some far out things. But if I asked you to design the truck for 2 to 3 to 4 years from now, right? Where it's like still present, but it needs to be innovative, having a writer do that for you, like put that scenario in a fantasy, like very real terms, but just a little bit further from reality, is so inspiring for designers. Because now it's like this user story that sounds good, that resonates and is authentic, but just a little bit beyond what the user, what the designer has thought of. And that's how writing can inspire the design process for some of these kind of futuristic systems.
And of course, I have to add that as we get into things like VR and more immersive experiences that are more like video games, storytelling really matters because there's no navigation menu with buttons and normal structure. It's really requires wayfinding other things from other worlds. Right?
Boring VR sucks.
And just I'm gonna hop the mic on this one.
Please do.
Like, obviously very excited. But I think another thing to understand, and I think a lot of writers do understand this, poetry and specific writing is empathy. When I would sit in a poetry workshop, it is literally putting yourself in the shoes of the person that you are designing for. So I think finding empathy through writing is something that's really important and kind of underestimated at this time, but writing gives you the tools to actually do that. So.
And so we talked at the beginning, so agree with all of your points, but I also want to add that not just VR, but every experience is a story. If your company has a content strategy team or has content writers, you should be working with them throughout the process, especially early on when you're crafting that initial experience. They can help craft that story that experience is telling.
Everyone's so much smarter than me. So my education background is Bauhaus. And after I went through that program and a similar program a little bit later, I worked at a company called Morningstar, which is down here. And the owner, at that time it was, 150 people. Now it's an international, gigantic company. But at that time, Joe Mansueto, the owner, would find it important to have everybody in the room for all sorts of different meetings. So, it being one of my first jobs, I didn't find it that unusual that, I, a designer, would be sitting in some sort of product development or biz dev or whatever it was meeting and just be like, yeah, everyone has an opinion and everyone has a viewpoint on it and whatever. Everyone brings a different skill set. Then as I went further in my career and I found that people like to stick folks in boxes. And I was completely baffled by that because if I go, I'm just not good at that thing, and if somebody else was here who was really good at it, I feel like we could make some sort of unicorny magic something or other out of this thing, whereas I can make it a horse, I guess is a half unicorn, right? So I think I always admire writers and I always see that they bring something so much different to the table, and I think that as we move forward, this divergence of jobs and titles and what do you do, I think you guys brought it up at the beginning, is disappearing in favor of what are the strengths that you're at, right? And then you design a team to design around weakness, raise your strengths, and make whatever the best thing is that you can make out of that. So I really like this division of titles, I guess, is necessary from a corporate structure standpoint, but I really think that if we're smart, we look to people who have unusual skill sets that we don't have to create something better.
So Oveta, in our talks before this, and I know a lot that you, Oveta from Six in our talks leading up to this, and I know something you write about and think about a lot, and you even touched on a little bit here, is designing with intelligent systems and all these new tools we're going to be having, but then the ethical implications as designers and what that means and what responsibilities we have as designers. So if you could speak to that, I think you have a lot of it.
Yeah, so I have a quote I wanted to say because it's hard for me to articulate this because I've literally been heads down on this topic for the last year, so I don't want to flood it.
But Tony Fadell, who founded Nest, used to work at Apple before, was responsible for the iPhone and the iPad design with obviously a whole team at Apple. Has recently shown up on what I call a mea culpa tour. So there's a Fast Company, I think, or a co-design story about him speaking in London. And it starts with his 3-year-old daughter, and his wife looks at him. The 3-year-old has done something wrong, like 3-year-olds do, and so they decided to use carrot and stick approach and took away her iPad. And the tantrum he describes as akin to, I don't know, World War III wounds or something, like the 3-year-old just couldn't take it. And so his wife gives him the side eye and just looks at him and literally says, like most wives say to their husbands, "This is all your fault." Except she's right? Because he designed the iPad. And so when she says, "This is all your fault," that's a whole new meta meaning. And so he said at this London design conference, I wake up in cold sweats thinking, what did we bring into the world, right? He is not the first inventor or designer to say that, right? Keurig said the same thing, sold his company for $4.7 billion, and now goes to sleep with nightmares about how unsustainable his design is. That's one thing when you can maybe do the scenario of what you created and figure out maybe all the black hat things that can go wrong, Bitcoin, anyone. But when you design an intelligent system that is designed to interact with other intelligent systems, a la Facebook designing its chatbots to negotiate. The chatbots started negotiating thought English was way too efficient, so they created their own language to negotiate with each other with. And the Google PhD designers, a lot smarter than all of us in this room, could not figure out what they were doing. So they stopped them, right? So they stopped, turned it off. So Stuart Russell talks about this idea of we're not going to be able to turn some of these things off. If a car is acting up, then you can maybe stop it or pull over to the side and turn it off. But when a deep learning intelligent system, unsupervised algorithm, starts creating baby algorithms as the parent to do things and accomplish objectives outside of English or programming languages because they're finding efficient ways to communicate, you are no longer the arbiter of ethics, control, or anything else. There is a transference from the creator, who are we, the humans, to the system. So, that is in the future. It was 9 months ago when I started looking at this. It's not anymore because Google just released a video of its intelligent agent learning how to walk, which is not a big deal, except the creators only programmed it to get from point A to point B. The learning how to walk part was all the intelligent system. So it tried the systems of rewards falling down, going sideways. If you see this video, it's pretty hilarious. But it's a real good demonstration of the things that we are designing today are going to have their own set of actions ethics, and values. Now, what does that mean for us? Are we doomed, right?
Yes.
Oh no, we'll talk about this later, right? We'll put you off in the room.
Thanks, Adam.
Right. We're not doomed if, to me, I'm optimistic. We're not doomed if we do not acknowledge this fact. If we let go of our hubris as intelligent human beings and remember and just say we're going to design things that are going to be more intelligent than us. I was speaking about AI to a 7th grade class, and I taught them about digital footprints and how they take a picture of themselves and then it goes on Instagram and then they Google themselves and the pictures start changing over time. And a little 7th grader looked at me and she said, "Do you think the machines will be smarter than us?" If we do not agree with what that little girl is thinking, we're going to have a problem. Because we're not going to stop to think about our designs to design values and ethics systems in them. Now, what those values and ethics systems are, who knows? That's for all you future designers. But the idea that we need to acknowledge our bias as humans, and we need to acknowledge that math is opinion in models. We need to acknowledge that it's not agnostic and the tools are not all on their own. They come from us and they will be smarter than us, and we need to put that into our design process.
Oh, that as an ethics designer.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ray Kurzweil. He's a kind of famous. He is the kook. I've heard him talk. In 2005 or something, in 2005 he had AI that would write poetry, could create pictures. He's kind of the big proponent of the whole idea of singularity. A lot of the technologists on the West Coast, though, are kind of worship him still. They kind of worship a lot of his ideas. The idea of singularity is huge. But things like what Obed is talking about with ethics, I think is in many ways unique to the Midwest. And I think that's part of why us as Chicagoans should be trying to get really involved in this space, in this kind of intersection of machine learning, artificial intelligence, data science, and design. Because I think Chicago should try to become more and more of a thought leader in this space to stop things like the singularity from happening. Because, yes, Charles.
I think you actually raised a really good point, Mike, in terms of the biggest problem that I see with AI is that the people who are designing it are extremely centralized.
Yes.
How can we distribute that, and so that a lot of people have access to it? I think that'll make for a lot more interesting ecology of AI versus two companies, Apple and Google, or three, Amazon.
I think there's another aspect to this where a lot of these are, frankly, engineering technology experiments, and the role of design is just getting started. So how do we use them all as tools to create, to integrate them together to make something unique? And then we're doing our job as orchestrating the experience, but with maybe bizarre tools, right? Or definitely new tools.
Yeah, I think that you're right about
There's
that.
another portion of this. Every tool that man, human, woman has created has affected us. So there's a whole line of thought that the evolution of the hand, for instance, had to do with how we made tools. So the tools made us as much as we made the tools. So with this AI thing, it's not just baby algorithms going off on their own. It's how this entire ecosystem is coming back and affecting us, and how we go forward in that sort of back and forth.
Yeah, I think what the second half of that was like, what's the answer to this, right? And I personally, I'm optimistic because I know a lot of people in this room really subscribe to human-centered design. And so if you have technologists and engineers who are literally answering the question, what can we do? Then you put a UX designer or a design researcher or a human-centered design person in the room, immediately the question becomes, what should we do, right? It shifts and it changes. And then you have design by purpose, right? Instead of just because the technology is there.
I'll also pitch it back to the writers on the panel, where a lot of AI is about semantics and manipulating language or making something new out of it. So it's going to rock your world too, even more than the AP articles about the sports score.
Yeah, for sure. When you started talking about these, AI creating its own language, I started thinking right away about linguistics, folks that have PhDs in linguistics being able to even assess the language and break it down and sort of be able to translate to humans even. And where does AI come in terms of helping even humans translate other AI? So that's a topic that I would love to be a part of and shaping in the future, but as of now I'm like, how do we begin?
Most of the unsupervised algorithms that learn on their own are language-based, at least right now.
I for one.
Yeah, I know.
Can I answer a question?
Please do.
I for one welcome our robot overlord.
Thank God.
But as you've been looking into this, because I'm not as deep and you're into this thing as you are, but what is the fear level of what you're talking about versus that's not gonna happen? So I mean, how?
Yeah, I think the video that Casey played with the labor secretary kind of sums it up, right? We think that we're smart enough, right? We think that we're smart enough, or that it's so far out that we will be able to plan for this. Now, let me just say, I think Mike has a good point here. If you think of the coasts, right? You think of California, what they're doing out there, right? Silicon Valley, all that wonderful stuff that they're doing out there. It is about the technology, right? But you come to a Midwest type of person, and we're just kind of like different, right? We think about people, right? Like that's us. And I think this of the barometer out there, I think people there. You have the doomsdayers, right? And Stephen Hawkins and Elon Musk, who has created a lot of this technology, is out there ringing the bell. And then you have Mr. Zuckerberg saying, "What are you talking about? This is going to be great," right? And so we're kind of like squarely in the middle. I'm not a Luddite, right? Like I'm not, because I really do believe that if we think about this, we can design systems that are better than humans in a good way. So we can design intelligent systems that make decisions not based upon selfishness and bias, and all the data models with predictive policing are polluted, biased models. They come from people who arrest black people more than they do white people, who think that people who are not of different colors are more prone to crime. And so these get codified in numbers, and then people say, oh, they're just numbers. It's nothing in there. No, it's bias. And so we have a chance to design an intelligent system that doesn't have bias. But we can't do that if we don't acknowledge, first of all, that there's bias, I think. And so the barometer of where we are for that, I think Mike is absolutely right. If you go to the coast in California, they're saying this is all great. But here at the University of Chicago and Northwestern and DePaul, especially DePaul, because of this human-centeredness that we have, we understand that technology can and will go wrong.
I feel like maybe we should send them the Terminator and Matrix series.
And Asimov's book.
I
mean, Jesus, it's been telegraphed forever.
Casey, can I make a segue?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so a couple of things. So these two design, we'll get props for the Human Center too. So in addition to the Paul, but that's also very Chicago thing. So I agree with you there. Kevin Kelly recently talked about the opportunity to create an epistemology truthfulness score to help balance out bias, which requires creating confidence in how accurate information is, because this is recognized as an issue. Kind of like PageRank for Google, which we don't talk about anymore because it's been around for a while, but PageRank for truthfulness. And it was a conversation about fake news, right? But because you're right, there are bias. But I think the big macro view here is that the shift to that fourth industrial revolution, or whatever, fourth economy, it's accelerating because of all of this. And we talk every day at work, and when we look at emerging tech, about how things that used to take 5 years are happening in 5 months. And, like, it's all happening really, really fast. So the guy talking about way out is hilarious. But we should be enlightened about that. And the other part, which is the Kurzweil Singularity University part, Peter Diamandis talks about abundance, and the abundance of supply of resources instead of constrained resources.
Yep.
And it messes up supply and demand in economics. So there's always an Uber car available despite the price surges that they put on us. Right? It's like endless supply of everything is something that we'll have to consider. Because with digital, there's no finite copies of copies. It just goes forever.
Speaking of fake news, so not to call you out, Casey, but I'm gonna. So in the beginning of your presentation, you know, and like seeing all of the headlines that generally create outrage and are purposefully constructed with language to get you to click through to it. So a lot of those headlines that you're seeing, you know, like, oh, the end of the world is near, definitely something that we need to consider, but also want to acknowledge that the whole reason why fake news exists, and this is something that is found, if you are into the podcast Waking Up with Sam Harris, I highly recommend it. He had a design ethicist onto his podcast, and his name is Tristan Harris, and he was actually a product ethicist at Google. And you know, what they talk about is Facebook and AI. Ever since they took away their human editorial team, they're creating this outrage machine. So that's why those headlines are rising to the top. So I just have to drop a little Tristan Harris into the mix because I see a few of you lighting up over there.
It's also fascinating. We're spending so much time talking about algorithms. And before this started, I pulled a couple quotes, or maybe more classic design quotes from, you know, the maybe timeless. Is if design is embedded persuasion, then we have an opportunity to curate everything that's going on and persuade people and find that balance, rather than just let the technology do whatever it does for the economic interests or the shock value.
Just to add, just to kind of wrap up this conversation, but also give people some homework to do. Read this book, You're Not a Gadget. It was actually written by one of the creators of virtual reality as a critique of kind of this algorithmic future. This was written in 2011, so pretty smart guy to be able to predict some of this stuff. And then Bruno Latour's work, We're Not the Masses, is a good kind of introduction to it.
Well, I just want to end with this quote.
So we can end on a high note. And I would encourage you to watch the TED Talk with Stuart Russell. He's an AI researcher and literally wrote the book on AI. And he posits a framework on how we can be optimistic about AI. And from that talk, he talks about really designing values into the systems. And it's a really great way to look at it, and it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time now. But he has this quote that said, "We had better be quite sure that the purpose put into the machine is the purpose which we really desire." So that quote speaks to me in so many ways. It was written in 1960. And it speaks to me in a way, as designers, we have the opportunity to make sure that the Terminator doesn't happen, right? Skynet, whatever. It is our responsibility as designers, as people who are closest to the people who will be affected by this technology, to keep them front and center. And if you do human-centered design, these are the questions that you're going to be asking yourself when you start designing these systems. So I'm excited to see all of you in the room because I know that you guys are going to go forth and spread the gospel. Human-centered design doesn't end when the tool you can't understand, right? It starts with the user, right? It starts with the person. And as long as we keep them front and center, I think we will be just ahead of those loose chatbots.
All right. That was great. That was one question. We got like 100.
Question for
So, some of you up here are teachers. Some of you are still students, recent students, and everything in between. And as I was talking with each of you in preparation for this, there was I was trying to hammer home more practical, like what skills should we be developing to be relevant in the new economy and the new future we're all discussing. But on top of that, like what skills should be taught in school, or what is not being taught right now that'll make us all more relevant and more marketable in the future, to take it practical route.
So shout out to the liberal arts majors. Like I said, being an English major, poetry major, there was a lot of cast doubt upon the value of a liberal arts degree. And I think obviously STEM has taken the spotlight as it deserves to. It's very important. But I think just placing value upon liberal arts, empathy, history, etc., that's going to enable us to have the empathy skills to actually complement AI, complement these bots, and hopefully provide some curation in addition to the bots doing their thing. So I just, after years of liberal arts are useless, I was happy to actually see a headline, which maybe the purpose was outrage, that that it's actually extremely valuable and it will continue to be in the world of tech and design.
Okay, so what is not being... So education is a weird topic in general when you get specifically to this area. I think as we've talked about this stuff, you can see that there are things which are maybe unpredictable that emerge and will be emerging much quicker as time goes forward. I think that, I don't know what's being taught in school today. Back in the old days, when I was in school. But I think what probably is important is teaching the things that we were just talking about. I think that behavioral psychology, I think frameworks, I think ethical things, I think even things like doing things with your hands like carpentry and sculpture and all these types of things, I think are all important and all inform what you ultimately end up doing. And they give you a unique perspective on systems that may automate themselves or that you design to automate yourself. I think there are many things that we don't think of when we think of this education. We think of, how am I going to learn X language or program or blah, 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 which are all important, right? Like you said. But I think that the human experience in UX design education is going to be central and key to stopping all the negative things that are going to happen. They're just going to happen. And so I think that the things that you may not think of immediately, I think as required courses are going to be the centerpiece to a well-rounded and important education in the future. And to add a little bit to that, I think that the future of education in all aspects, and even in UX, is not centrally collegiate. I think it's finding the thing that your heart wants to do, or what you kind of are designed to do, and following that in whatever form factor it comes. College, continuing education, apprenticeship, working at a place like this, whatever it is. But I think that these things combined are going to help keep humans front and center. And that's what I think is important in the education aspect of this. The how to do stuff and what's the latest trend and all that stuff comes when you're in the workplace and you're immersed in the world. But the education thing lays the foundation for how to think as you move forward. And so that's why I think those things are key.
Yeah, I totally agree with
All of that. I think, just to build on that, I think I wish more schools did interdisciplinary collaborative projects. Most schools, you're in a project team with other HDI students or other UX students or other interaction design students or whatever. So it's very monolithic, right? Even though you're doing like a project, you all come from different places and stuff. Like, I really want to see where it's the data, the predictive analytics major, and it's the business MBA guy, and it's the poetry major, and it's the interaction designer, and you all are thrown into a room, and it's like, here's the challenge. Because at IDEO, that's like the magic, right? It's the secret sauce. It's like, we all are good in our perspective disciplines, but when you talked about that before, about building half the unicorn. When you put all these different disciplines and industries and fields into the room, then you get these perspectives that may not have come before, and it's magic, right? We all know how to work with other designers. We all know how to work with other people who understand HCI. But then what happens when the MBA guy comes in and says, we need to build this intelligent system to do X, Y, Z, right? Or what happens when the data scientist comes in and says, why do we care what the human is going to do? We need to build this model the way it works. So I would really just say, if there's anybody who's designing education programs right now, is that put interdisciplinary teams together and give them design challenges. Now, of course, that's design thinking, and we all know that, but people need to learn that. Because we are designing ecosystems, right? Systems. We're not designing tools anymore. We're not designing screens. We're not designing things that are divorced. So we shouldn't be divorced in teaching those disciplines.
So this was another conversation I was having beforehand with my friend Charles there and Judy back there, about it's not enough to know just design thinking anymore. You really need to know systems thinking. There's actually a really good book, again, I'll plug another book, Systems Thinking, a primer. It was written by an HCI person. She was out of Yahoo Research, I believe. So really recommend picking that up. And then again, I talked about kind of learning more about data and kind of just kind of getting basic data literacy. You don't have to be a data scientist. You don't have to know everything, how to build a data model, but you have to know enough to kind of have those conversations. And kind of going on the interdisciplinary thing, designers don't typically have as much business knowledge, a lot of kind of organizational structure knowledge. I think those are other things that the design education as a whole needs to include more of. And then you mentioned educational program. I'm actually working on some course proposals at some universities to teach some of these courses, and I'm working with John King. We're working with this. Hopefully, we're both hopeful that it'll be a panel series on kind of the future of the data economy. We're trying to bring together design, IIT, IB, will hopefully be working with us. We're trying to get either Booth or Kellogg kind of feed the business side. And then, of course, data science will be part of it as well.
So they just said everything I was going to say, which is great. It means there's a pattern that's in the air. As the ID guy on the stage, where we primarily teach strategy, but we're still called the Institute of Design. We've attempted some of these things. We create people that are hybrids and sometimes weird to the traditional community, but we are the future, for those of you that I see out here. What I'm working on adding into the curriculum at ID is embracing change management. So designers, by the nature of what we do, we are agents of change. Yep. And we often get so wrapped up in the craft that we forget to help other people see the vision and carry them along. Because generally we like the idea of change, but we hate the process of change. And we like the idea of innovation, but it's really scary and risky. And so we need to do a great job of taking our clients and our partners and our colleagues through that process. And it's a lot of relationship management as well. And in this world, in this building we sit in, we have people that are dedicated to relationships. And so, because it really is a full-time job. And we keep seeing this need for quote-unquote digital transformation. And I keep joking with Noel, who's over here, who I work with, that didn't that happen in the dot-com era? It's like it's still happening. And it's going to continue to happen. And that term will keep coming back, but it will mean different things. So digital transformation this time means what we've been talking about tonight with machine learning. But we have to carry people through what that means, because they don't get nerdy like we do.
And I think the change is that the designers are leading the way, right? It used to be kind of like the NBA guy said, blah, blah, blah. But because
they still think they are.
Right, they still think systems thinking, if you just design a digital tool to do one objective, how does that play out throughout the whole organization? So organizational design is very important, and technology and research and all these things, because sometimes you have to change organizational systems to be able to implement the designs. If you don't have people on your team that understand that, or the designer doesn't understand that need, then you're not serving your client well.
And the first thing we do with the change management initiative is look at the org chart and see if it looks like a Henry Ford factory.
Yes.
And if it does, then we go in and tell the executive teams, get ready for an inversion, right?
Right.
Because you have to take it head on, otherwise it'll probably break the company.
All right, well, I have a bunch more questions, but I would much rather throw it out to this audience that came out tonight. So are there any questions? I'm going to walk around with the mic, and we'll get this conversation going.
We can probably get a couple mics going.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah, Kristen, do you want to? Anyone over here?
He's like doing his move. He's like, oh my God, please.
So I'll stand up. So one question that I was. Is this
Yeah.
Okay. One question that I had. When you mentioned education in regards to HCI, there's also another thing that I was thinking about in regards to what's being taught in computer science. Do you also think that, like, in the computer science and software engineering programs and all those other like high-end technical programs, that like psychology should also be taught in that as well too? That way, like, it gives like programmers more like an understanding of like not only the types of tech that they're building, but like why they're building it for, like,
I just wanted to say, like, I read this paper. It was written in the 1950s called Man and Computer Symbiosis. It was written by J.C. Linkletter, who was what everybody considers to be the first computer scientist. He worked at MIT, and he worked during World War II, but he had this little side hustle on with this idea that he was going to build a personal computer. Back then, the computer was as big as this room, there was punch cards, all those things. J.C. Linkletter was the person who came up with the graphical user interface. He was the person who came up with speech to text. He predicted all of these things in that paper that Xerox guy read, created it, and Steve Jobs stole, right? So it goes back to him. But the thing that's most important about JC is that he was also a psychology major. So he was a math major and computer science major, but he was a psychology major, and it was his psychology major that had him thinking about man's interaction with machine. And so, yes, I think every computer engineer, every computer scientist has to be involved in humanities, because if you're not, the systems that you create will not be adopted, and people won't use them. So, absolutely.
My bachelor's degree was actually computer science and creative writing. This goes back to kind of, again, liberal arts and kind of the importance of kind of a holistic view of saving.
I think that if there was a panel up here about career paths for computer scientists, they'd be having the same conversation about how do they double down on different skills. And just like designers are wondering, how much do I need to learn how to code? And I started out in the fine arts, you guys. I didn't say that. It's a photography guy. And I'll just say this, I saw an article today, and it was on the Singularity Hub, about researchers have found a way to read brainwaves and do facial recognition from your brainwaves, like faces that you saw that went into your memory. They're now reading your memory.
Mm-hmm.
So that's new photography.
Yeah.
So what do you do, right? No, I think that's what's happening. With the strategy work, we usually try to encourage a two-pronged approach. One is learn strategy skills that relate to business and experience, but then also learn crafts, because the crafts and skills will keep changing every 5 years or so, and you'll have to keep reinventing. So have a core, but then add more things. And as you exhaust computer science, you'll start looking at other topics of interest. And so psychology, obviously the humanities and the arts, but even within other more analytical areas, understanding how finance does financial modeling would help with going back to, and statistics helps being better at the core of computer science.
Can I give you a hippie answer?
Please.
Okay, and also just a book. So you guys are doing books. In one of my favorite books, which is called Be Here Now, which is a book about journey and transformation, they talk about chopping wood and carrying water, right? The mundane, everyday things that you must do. And I think that over the last few decades, the chopping wood and carrying water is quickly being recognized as coming together, right? Not as a, what do I do as a computer scientist, or as a designer, or as a blah, 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 blah. I think the everyday project is, how do I use my skills to enhance everything around me, to better everybody around me? So I think the answer is maybe obvious to us who are here, but may not be obvious to people who are on the longer tail of what we do and seeing the result of what we do. So I think it's also maybe a little bit of a mission to help those people understand why, right? So that we can influence the education system and get it, what these guys are talking about.
Oh, I just wanted to say,
The Dream Machine. That's the book about J.C. Linkletter. I would encourage you to read it. It really is inspiring about what they were doing in the 40s and 50s to precursor all this thing that we're doing today. And it's a great grounding in how personal computer came to be.
I have to add a bit about generational cycles. So, if you're talking about the 50s and 60s, there was a nerd, Christopher Alexander, who was an architect, who got his PhD from Harvard, and he wrote all about systems design in a book called The Pattern Language, which was the basis for object-oriented programming.
Yep.
So things that go from systems go back into new generations of the craft, and they go around and around and around.
Yep.
So that's the other big, like, aha, since you went back, to the 50s.
I did. I had to go there.
We're going to talk more later. You guys
I'm like a nerd, dude. I'm
Casey,
nerding out.
Got a question back over here.
Sorry we're making you wait.
No, I love digression.
Come nerd out with us.
Digression. I wrote a thing called In Praise of Digression, so you guys are great. And I'm going to digress a little bit. The question is ultimately going to go to integrated design. But to your point about the Linkletter stuff and so on, eventually Steve Jobs gave a critical $500,000 to Media Lab when it was supposed to be adopted. So it all went
Oh, yes, it all came.
So that's around the circle.
He paid for it.
To your point about abundance, and this actually is getting a little bit more to it, I deal a lot with people in business and business schools and that sort of thing, and this point annoys the hell out of me because we're in the midst of the 6th grade distinction. You cannot make more with less. You can do the business model, you can make a great speech, you can make a great TED Talk, but at the end of the day, we are in a larger environment, and this kind of ties into integrated design, which is an idea that came out of architecture, and people like Avery Lovitz have been making a big noise about this. And the idea is essentially an additive systems design thinking. You can get everybody who's involved in a building up front to figure out how you don't need an HVAC system and how you do that. And I've been thinking a lot about that because it's very dimensional. Where traditional design thinking, which has now been around for about 10 years and has become canon in every business environment, is very much, it's kind of lost its initial what this is. It's spark that the designers know. And when it goes all the way into the businesses, it comes down to here's how you be creative. Here's a methodology that will get you something. And it tends to be incremental and it tends to be one-dimensional. And I'm wondering, something like integrated design, when you look at the future of design, how do you see this move from human-centered to a larger environmental-centered and design thinking to integrated?
Can I just, super quick, I know that the methodology of design thinking is 10 or whatever decade old, but I have this conversation with Noel. Oftentimes, design thinking is not 10 years old. Design thinking is very much older than that. And people who want to make money from design thinking, who aren't designers, put names on things.
Yes.
Now they can sell it. Now they can teach it. Right? So I think that probably what will happen is the continuation of what you're seeing in nature moving towards, right? Rather than a separate methodology for everything. There will be, because people want to sell books. But but I think the natural progression is what you were talking about, for sure. For sure.
Yeah,
You know, so there's so much I want to say here, but I probably can't. So I'm not speaking for IDEO. But we do have, okay, so IDEO talks about design thinking. Now McKinsey talks about design thinking. Now IBM talks about design thinking. Okay, great. Everybody's design thinking. What we've moved on to at IDEO, and I encourage you guys to look this up, it's called the circular economy design. So this idea where it's not incremental, where you think about the ecosystem, and if you're going to design a new truck, you're thinking about how the truck will impact the environment. You're thinking about how the waste will go with the truck and the gas and all of that in the design process. So it's not this separation of impact from the design. And so the circular economy is our new obsession. It's something that we're preaching to all designers, but it's really about taking design thinking throughout the whole process and not divorcing it from the impact. It's about what we talked about before, not designing technology for technology's sake, but also looking at the impact that it's going to have, not only on the user, on the individual, but also society. So look that up. That's another homework assignment. Right. No, I'm talking to everybody else who do not. So, because I get this about design thinking. Even our clients are like, oh, we know all about design thinking. Okay, great. So now, what is the next thing? And I think this is something that we can talk to our clients about this idea of when we're talking about design, it's not just about this thing or this task. It's about the system and not divorcing that from the design.
So you mentioned kind of bringing everybody up to the beginning of the process and kind of having them all in the same room in the discussion. I think that's something that there needs to be more of. I mean, I've talked about kind of the importance of data science and some of the other things, but in general, there's still too much of that isolation. So Google's now been writing, like their design team has been writing about machine learning. But they're talking about, again, handing over the wall. They're not working collaboratively with their data scientists. Systems that we're designing now, and especially that we're designing in the future, are too complex for a single designer and just even a single discipline to really kind of grasp in a way that will really capture the best value for the end user and for the for society as well. So as much as possible, kind of bringing in these different voices, these different disciplines, poetry. I think it's important to just have these conversations, even if they're not being openly supported in your organization. Just reach across the table, grab a coffee. This is where the best ideas typically come from, like these clash of different ideas kind of coming together and inspiring new designs and new interfaces.
All right.
I'll keep it short. Coming from one of the places that originated design thinking, we don't really talk about it anymore. We've moved on to things like social innovation, areas which have great need for design, like healthcare, referring to the Institute of Design. At Digitas here, we've meshed design with marketing and technology because the CMOs are coming up to us saying, we just need a better experience. Like when you guys make things that have better ROI and are more engaging. And so we just stop using the buzzwords.
Got a question over here.
Somewhat ironically, I'm going to push back a little bit because I see that we're a human group and there's all this nice human design thinking and everything. And along the AI vector, I can't remember which sister agency it was, but I saw a talk a year ago where there are more and more teams that are designing Marcom artifacts for digital concierges. Now, when the machine becomes the customer, this whole human design thing kind of starts falling apart because it's not a human anymore. Yes, it may be a machine learning system that was originally designed by a human. So, do any of you have thoughts on that, just to kind of counterbalance things? Because I think that's a significant risk going forward that people are not talking about enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how to respond.
Yeah, I don't know.
So the machine is the user?
Yeah, so this is something that I didn't think we were going to touch on today, but I'm glad I brought it up. So,
count on me.
Yeah, Google just came out with its first multimodal machine learning algorithm. So it's an algorithm that was doing natural language processing, but also classification, but also something else. So it's not an algorithm that works on one kind of task. It's doing 3-4 different types. What it found is that the more different types of algorithms or machine learnings that this intelligent agent was doing, the faster it learned. So there is going to be a time in the not so near future where the experience, the user experience, will be between intelligent systems and a human. Might not be a human in the room, could be a human impacted, whatever, human affected. And so this is why we bring up kind of like when the human is the creator, designing ethical and value systems-based design, so that when the intelligent system is interacting with another intelligent system, it could be a car in the United States speaking to a petroleum building in India, right? Where they're conversing and the user's just in the car. So how do you design for that experience? And if you do not have ethical protocols or thinking about value systems in the algorithm models, then then you might have a problem, right? When the interaction is between the multimodal systems or the intelligent systems themselves. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's around the corner, but it is something to think about when the interaction is not between a human and a machine. When the machines are interacting with each other to affect, could be untold amounts of humans. The thing about we're trying to answer like, why is data design different? And the thing about it is scalability and speed for me. Those are the two things. And so I don't know. I push back on myself. I just changed myself. I don't know if it's different, if we need to think about that, but I do think it's something that needs to be put on the table, especially for interaction design.
I don't know why you're looking at me.
Because I'm waiting for you to come out of the pool there.
I'll add a little bit, and then we look down the panel here. I think at the end of the day, you're still talking about designing an ecosystem where there's the exchange of value, and that needs to be articulated and curated and figured out. And so we'll always have a role there. The theme here is that we always have to ladder up to something that the system doesn't do on its own. And that's the big push for us to always be finding something new to do and innovating or competing.
Well, I was going to say at the initial, when I first heard the question, my initial concern was, well, they're not the end user, right? The computer's not the end user, but if they're...
I was just saying that at the outset, my thought was, well, they're not the end user, but then I think about, well, but then you've got a person at a flight gate who's talking to a baggage handler, who's talking to whomever, and they're a chain in that, they're a link in that chain of communication. So each moment of potential failure, they're acting on behalf of. So yeah, I need a nap now.
Yeah,
so,
it hurts your brain, right?
Yeah, no, but it's an important point.
But it brings up this idea of designing for journeys versus designing for moments. It's the situation action, and that's really what's going to affect us as designers, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly where to go with this, but the first thing that I thought of was designing power dynamics. So if you essentially have several intelligent systems talking to each other, like where is the balance of power even amongst those systems? So, and I do think that gets back to ethics, but that design of power and decision-making power could affect the end user. So that's something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add to everybody's reading list again. Lucy Suchman wrote, her dissertation was on this situated action, and that kind of gives you the limitations of artificial intelligence and how there's a lot of context that machines just can't necessarily take in. There might be some things where machines can interact with other machines, but there's always going to be some human element, some human intervention necessary, because machines can't necessarily can't take in enough signals currently, at least, and won't be able to within the next decade at least, in order to really understand and predict every potential thing that could come in and wreak havoc in what it currently knows.
Right. So you're going to have to design those.
Yeah.
All right, do we have other questions for here?
Any other questions?
All right, well, a big thank you to our panel. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, the way we like to wrap up our IxDA events is to see if anybody here is hiring. So if you go ahead and raise your hand, we'll run a microphone over to you. Anybody? Oh.
Hi, HST Solutions is hiring UX, UI, and developers.
Oh, your name?